Hey guys, a wagon wheel that has stopped turning somewhere west of Independence, Missouri. One side of the canvas roof has sagged. A flour sack presses against a wooden chest. A child is told to climb down. An iron tire has shifted, or a spoke has cracked, or the axle beneath the whole moving household has begun to split. The result is immediate. The family's food, bedding, tools, clothing, medicine, and plans are now sitting in one place, while other wagons continue creaking toward the Platte River and, far beyond it, Oregon. And that is the first modern fantasy we need to leave beside the road tonight. Oregon Trail families did not cross the continent inside a dependable covered vehicle. Most people walked for long stretches while the wagon carried the heavy things. It was less a passenger coach than a pantry, tool shed, bedroom, storeroom, and very nervous wooden investment rolling on four wheels. When one wheel failed, the family did not simply lose transportation. It risked losing the system that kept the household alive. The strange part is that a broken wagon was rarely only a wagon problem. It might already be an ox problem, because the team had been pulling too much weight. It might become a weather problem, because every hour spent repairing the axle pushed the family closer to late-season cold in the mountains. And quickly, it became a people problem, because someone had to decide whether the rest of the wagon company would stop and help. History likes to advertise self-reliance. The trail itself preferred ropes, spare parts, borrowed animals, shared muscle, uncomfortable bargaining, and at least one person who remembered where the hammer had been packed. If calm history about overloaded wagons, exhausted oxen, and plans coming apart one bolt at a time makes good bedtime company, like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me which single object from your home you would try to save if the wagon could carry almost nothing else. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Before the wheel cracked, before an ox refused another step, the family had already made hundreds of decisions about survival. Those decisions were stacked inside the wagon. At the jumping-off towns near the Missouri River, possessions still looked like protection. A chest represented order. Extra clothing represented caution. Furniture represented the home waiting at the destination. Once the journey began, those same objects became resistance, pressing down through the wagon box, axle, hubs, wheels, and finally into the shoulders of the animals. A typical emigrant wagon was smaller than the enormous prairie schooners later art encouraged people to imagine. It had to be light enough for draft animals to pull, and sturdy enough to survive months of vibration, mud, ruts, heat, riverbanks, and steep grades. Every pound mattered. Flour mattered, tools mattered, bedding mattered, a sentimental chair mattered considerably less. Many families learned this lesson before they had travelled very far along the Platte Corridor. The trail acquired its own roadside inventory, boxes, furniture, cookware, clothing, and property judged less valuable than movement. Some emigrants certainly packed too optimistically, but throwing something away could also mean the family was finally understanding the road. Imagine the wagon stopped in the morning light. The team stands in its yokes, switching tails at flies. Someone pulls a trunk onto the ground. The lid opens. Clothing is divided. A few useful items return to the wagon. The rest remain beside the trail because memory has weight. And the oxen are the ones being asked to carry it. Oxen were widely used because they offered a practical balance. They were strong, generally less expensive than horses, and able to live largely on grass when grass and water were available. They moved slowly, which was not necessarily a flaw when the household was already walking at roughly the same speed. But an ox was not a machine with horns. It needed forage, water, healthy feet, a properly fitted yoke, manageable loads, and time to recover. A family could leave Missouri with solid animals and still reach the Western country with a weakened team. Heavy traffic consumed grass around popular campsites. Dry stretches increased pressure on water, heat, dust, long days, bad footing, and poor decisions accumulated inside living bodies. One ox could simply begin moving more slowly. The yoke shifted unevenly. The stronger animal carried more of the pull. The wagon fell behind. The driver urged the team forward, but encouragement did not produce grass, and confidence was not yet available by the bucket. Now the family had choices, though none were comfortable. They could rest the team and lose time. They could remove weight and lose property. They could rotate in a spare animal, trade for another, or ask another household to help pull the wagon. They could move food, bedding, or children into another vehicle. In a severe case, they could leave the wagon and continue with only what people or pack animals could carry. Every option revealed something the popular legend preferred to hide. The better-funded household had more ways to recover. It might carry spare parts, additional livestock, useful trade goods, or cash for a repair at a fort. A poorer family might possess the same courage and far fewer choices. Survival was never a clean contest in which character alone determined the winner. And the wagon company mattered. Several adults could raise a wagon more safely than one exhausted father, trying to prove the 19th century had not yet invented asking for help. Another family might lend rope, the chain, an animal, or someone who understood wheel repair. Others watched the children, gathered fuel, and began the delayed meal. That final part is easy to miss. Mechanical failure did not suspend household labour. If a wheel took half the afternoon to repair, people still needed water, animals needed grazing, the sick needed care. Children became hungry with astonishing loyalty to the schedule. When the hammering and arguing ended, cooking might only be beginning. The diary may say, repaired the wagon and moved on. Inside that short sentence could be hours of lifting, searching, borrowing, feeding, calming, carrying, and deciding which possession would not continue west. Then came the weather. A storm did not need to destroy the wagon to endanger the family. It only needed to remove time. Rain softened the road. Wheels sank. Rivers rose. Damp bedding became harder to dry. Animals strained against mud that held the wagon as firmly as a hand around an ankle. Later, heat dried wood and increased thirst. Dust entered eyes, clothing, food, and every mechanical surface. Wooden wheel parts could shrink, allowing an iron tire to loosen. At camp, water might be needed for people, livestock, cooking, and the wheel itself. One bucket could become a complete argument about priorities, and all of these delays accumulated. A lost morning searching for cattle did not look fatal. 2 days beside a flooded river did not look fatal. Half a day repairing a tongue did not look fatal. But the family was travelling within a seasonal window. Every delay moved the mountain crossing slightly closer to cold weather, reduced forage, rain, mud, or snow. That is where tonight's journey truly begins. Not with one dramatic disaster, but with a household discovering that survival could be lost in small portions. A little strength from the oxen, a little wood from the wheel, a little food from the wagon, and a little time from the calendar. The wheel beside us has not turned yet. Before it does, the family must decide what can be repaired, what can be shared, and what must be left on the ground. The first thing that comes off the wagon is not always the heaviest thing. Sometimes it is the thing that suddenly looks least necessary. A chair can seem essential in a kitchen back home, and ridiculous beside a wheel sunk to its hub in Platte River mud. A trunk full of dishes may represent civilization at the departure point, and become 40 pounds of bad judgment 200 miles later. Even objects chosen with care begin to change meaning, once every ounce must be pulled by animals that are losing strength. So the family kneels in the dust and opens boxes. Food stays. Tools usually stay. Bedding stays if the nights are cold enough. Extra clothing is judged by weight, weather, and whether anyone still fits into it. Books, furniture, decorative objects, and pieces of a former household are examined with a seriousness they may never have received at home. Once the trail became steep, the argument over what mattered was settled in pounds. This was one reason so many travellers walked. The wagon was already carrying the things that could not carry themselves: flour, bacon, beans, coffee, cookware, spare parts, tools, blankets, medicine, clothing, and whatever remained of the family's old life filled the box. Adding several adults to that burden was possible for short stretches, especially for the sick, injured, elderly, or very young. But the romantic image of a family riding comfortably beneath white canvas gives the wagon far more kindness than it usually offered. Inside, space was tight. The canvas kept off some sun and rain, but not all of it. Dust entered anyway. Heat gathered. The wagon lurched over ruts and stones. Every object shifted. A loose tool could strike a wooden wall. A pot could rattle for hours. Bedding absorbed damp. Food sacks tore. The wagon did not glide west. It argued with the road one jolt at a time. Most able travellers therefore spent much of the day outside it. They walked beside the wheels, guided animals, watched children, searched for missing stock, and tried not to place a foot where several thousand animals had already turned the ground into powder or mud. Walking saved animal strength, but it transferred part of the journey into human legs, backs, feet, and patience. That transfer of effort was constant. If the oxen carried less, people carried more. If the wagon moved faster, the walkers worked harder to keep pace. If a child became tired, someone held the child or made room inside. If illness placed one adult in the wagon, another person inherited that adult's work. The moving household was never only the wagon. It was a web of bodies, objects, animals, and repeated tasks, all adjusting to one another. By evening, the family did not simply stop. The day had to be undone and rebuilt. Animals were unyoked and taken to water or grass. The wagon was checked. Food was unpacked. A fire had to be made, sometimes with fuel that was scarce, poor, or unpleasant. Water had to be carried. Meals had to be prepared. Clothing might need mending. Children needed washing, feeding, supervision, or comfort. Someone searched for a missing cup. Someone else discovered that the coffee had absorbed the personality of a nearby grease container. Then, before dawn, the entire small world had to be packed again. This daily packing mattered because poor balance could damage the wagon or exhaust the team. Heavy goods needed to be positioned with some care. Frequently used objects had to remain accessible. The family could not bury the medicine beneath an iron tool chest and then act surprised when illness refused to wait for better organisation. The wagon box was therefore both storage space and survival puzzle. Every item competed for room. Food supplies were especially important because they became lighter only by being eaten. That was the one category of cargo the family expected to lose gradually. But even food created difficult choices. Carry too little and the household risked hunger or expensive purchases later. Carry too much and the animals paid for the caution from the first day. A normal emigrant load could already reach well over £1,000. A badly overloaded wagon asked wheels, axles, tongues and teams to absorb strain every hour. The family's fear of future scarcity could therefore create present mechanical failure. The calculation changed continuously. A sack of flour that felt reassuring in Missouri might feel dangerous on a steep western grade. Yet abandoning food was far more serious than abandoning furniture. A family deciding what to remove from a failing wagon was not sorting objects into useful and useless. It was sorting different forms of risk. Keep the food and strain the team. Discard the food and trust that more can be bought. Keep the tools and preserve repairability. Discard tools and reduce weight immediately. Keep extra bedding and prepare for cold. Leave it behind and move faster toward the very mountains where cold will matter most. No decision remained good in every condition. Wealth altered these calculations. A family with cash could replace supplies, pay a ferry, buy an animal, or obtain repair work where such services existed. A family without cash might need to barter away something useful, depend on generosity, or continue with a damaged system because the safer option was unaffordable. Experience mattered too. Someone who understood animals might notice rubbing from a yoke before a sore became serious. Someone who understood wheels might hear a change in the hub before the damage became obvious. Someone who had packed for appearance rather than repair might own a handsome tablecloth and no useful length of chain, which is a difficult aesthetic position when the wagon is leaning. Yet even experienced travellers could not control everything. A route that had been manageable for one company could be torn up by traffic before the next arrived. Grass could be consumed. Water could become fouled or difficult to reach. A repaired wagon could fail again because the underlying wood had already been weakened. An animal that looked healthy in the morning could show lameness by afternoon. The household therefore lived in a state of constant inspection. Hands touched wheel hubs to check heat. Eyes watched the team for changes in gait. Ears learned the normal creak of the wagon and listened for a sharper sound inside it. At camp, adults looked at the sky, the river, the grass, the animals, and the remaining food. Children watched the adults watching everything. This was how survival often felt before disaster. Not panic, but attention. The family that noticed a loose iron tire early had more choices than the family that waited for it to roll free. The family that reduced weight before the animals collapsed had more choices than the family forced to unload beside an exhausted team. The household that treated every evening repair as part of tomorrow's travel understood something important. Movement had to be manufactured each day. It came from grease on an axle, water carried to camp, bread divided carefully, animals allowed to graze, clothing dried, children settled, and one more object quietly removed from the load. The wheel can turn again now, but it turns lighter than before, and as the wagon begins to move, the family hears the slow rhythm of the team ahead of it, steady for the moment, though not yet strong enough to be trusted without question. The rhythm lasts until one animal shortens its step. At first, the change is almost too small to name. The left ox places one hoof more carefully. The yoke shifts. The animal beside it begins carrying more of the pull. The wagon still moves, and nobody calls it a crisis. But the driver notices. He watches the shoulders beneath the wooden yoke. He checks the feet when the company stops. He looks for swelling, a cut, a stone lodged where it should not be, or skin rubbed raw by badly fitted wood. Waiting for collapse meant surrendering several easier choices. Oxen were valuable because they made heavy movement possible without demanding the same purchase price or feed system as many horses. They were strong, patient when handled well, and able to live largely on grass along the route. That last advantage sounds generous until thousands of animals arrive at the same campsites. The grass nearest water disappears first. One company grazes its teams, another follows. By the time a later wagon train reaches the place marked as a good campsite, the green margin may have been chewed down to short stems and dust. The family has reached water, but the animal's fuel is already gone. The driver checks the yoke again. A wooden yoke joined animals into a working pair, but it also concentrated pressure. If it fit poorly, shifted, or rubbed against already tired flesh, strength could turn into injury. The same tool that allowed two animals to pull together could damage the bodies providing the power. So the team stops, the wagon tongue lowers. Hands work around the yoke while flies gather. One person holds an animal steady, another checks the sore place. Someone brings water. The family has not travelled far that morning, and the sun is already climbing. Behind them, another wagon approaches. This is where animal failure becomes social pressure. A stopped family does not occupy only its own time. On a narrow grade, at a crossing, or in a difficult stretch of road, its problem may slow others. People offer help, wait impatiently, or suggest solutions with the special confidence of those whose own oxen are still standing. The practical solution might be to reduce the load again. A sack comes down, then a box. Perhaps another wagon carries part of the food for a day. Perhaps a stronger team is brought alongside for a steep pull. Several adults push at the wheels while someone guides the animals. For a few yards, the household moves because another household has lent its strength. That assistance may be generous. It may also create debt, resentment, bargaining, or expectation. Shared survival rarely arrives as a perfectly warm community moment. The lender still needs the animal returned. The assisting family still has its own schedule. A wagon company can behave like a neighbourhood, a work crew, a committee, and an argument without changing location. Spare animals gave some families more room to recover. A fresh ox could rotate into a team while a weaker one rested. Additional stock could replace an animal that became unusable. But spare animals also needed grass, water, supervision, and money at the beginning. Insurance ate too. A wealthier household might accept that cost. A poorer one might begin with only the animals required to move the load. When one failed, the family did not become less determined than its neighbours. It simply reached the edge of its available choices sooner. Buying a replacement was possible in some places, but price, condition, and availability varied. A family might trade for an animal tired, poorly trained, or unfamiliar with its new partner. The new pair had to learn to pull together while the household continued west. You might notice the weak ox early. The harder question is whether you would stop while every healthy wagon around you kept moving. Livestock could also stray. Morning might begin with a missing ox rather than a moving wagon. Adults and older children searched creek bottoms, low hills, brush, and tracks in trampled ground. The company waited, or did not. A few lost hours might be recovered. A full day might not be. The weather window was narrowing, though nobody could see it the way they could see a broken wheel. And then there was water. Oxen needed it, but access was not always simple. A stream could be muddy, crowded, steep-banked, or farther away than expected. A dry stretch demanded careful timing. Animals driven too hard toward distant water might arrive in worse condition than animals moved slowly enough to preserve strength. Rain could solve one problem and create three more. It filled low places and softened dry ground, but it also turned the road to mud. The same oxen that had struggled from thirst now strained against wheels held by wet earth. Their hooves slipped. The wagon sank. The load that seemed manageable on firm ground became heavier without gaining a single object. People unload again. Food sacks, bedding, and boxes are carried across the worst section. The oxen pull an emptier wagon through. Then everyone walks back for the cargo. Distance is crossed 3 times to move the household once. No one records this as conquest. It is mostly mud, lifting, tired animals, and the discovery that the road can charge interest on every pound. If an animal could no longer continue, the decision became harder. The family might rest it, trade it, replace it, or leave it. In desperate circumstances, livestock might be slaughtered, though the choice depended on condition, need, location, and whether the meat could be used safely. There was no single trail rule that transformed loss into a clean solution. The deeper danger was imbalance. One weak animal forced another to work harder. One slow wagon separated a family from help. One day of poor grazing reduced tomorrow's distance. One delayed morning brought the company closer to the season it had hoped to outrun. The team ahead still walks. Its rhythm is no longer perfectly even, but the sore place has been noticed early. Part of the load has moved elsewhere. The animals have been watered. The family has surrendered another object and gained another day. For now, that is survival. Attention, restraint, patience, and adjustment before collapse. And beyond the next rise, Chimney Rock begins to appear against the sky. Impressive, unmistakable, and not nearly as comforting as it looks. The travellers have reached a famous landmark, but they are still only part-way through the journey, and the long chain of grass, water, and workable campsites ahead is becoming less forgiving. Chimney Rock gives the company something solid to point at. It does not give the oxen anything to eat. The wagons move through the Platte corridor towards Scott's Bluff, their canvas tops visible for miles. Travellers who have imagined these landmarks for years may feel that they are finally deep inside the West. The animals experience the moment differently. They lower their heads toward grass cropped close by earlier herds. A campsite is not simply a pleasant place where tired people decide to rest. It is a temporary supply station that must provide water for people, water for animals, grass for livestock, fuel for cooking, room for wagons, and ground dry enough to sleep on. A place can succeed at 5 and fail at the 6th. The stream may be clear, but the grass is already gone. The grass may be good, but the bank is too steep for animals to reach safely. The ground may be level, but the water tastes of mud. Livestock, or everything a crowded trail has contributed upstream. A campsite with water but no grass was useful in roughly the same way as a kitchen with plates but no food. Drivers look toward the grazing. Someone studies the bank. Children are warned away from deep water. Animals pull toward the stream before the wagon is properly placed. A tired family wants to stop immediately, while a more experienced traveller may insist on moving farther because the grass near the obvious campsite has already been eaten down. That argument is not about scenery. It is about tomorrow morning. An ox that does not eat enough tonight may not pull well tomorrow. A team forced to graze far from camp is harder to guard. Animals released carelessly may wander toward better forage and leave the family beginning the next day with a search instead of a departure. The road's fuel could walk away in the dark, so camp required watchers. Someone had to keep track of the livestock while everyone else tried to eat and sleep. Older children or hired hands might help, but the labour of noticing, calling, fetching and worrying spread through the household. A bell tied to livestock could help reveal movement at night. Its sound came and went beyond the wagons. A person under canvas might listen for it between wind, coughing, crying children, and the small noises of a camp that never became completely still. Silence could be restful. Silence could also mean the animal wearing the bell had gone too far away. Before dawn, someone rose to find the team. Grass dampened shoes. Animals stood scattered in low light, difficult to distinguish from brush. The searcher gathered them, checked them, fitted the yokes, and prepared them to pull. Meanwhile, the household came apart and reassembled. Blankets were rolled, food was measured, cooking equipment was packed, water containers were filled, children were dressed, fed, corrected, and assigned small tasks. A family could be exhausted before the first mile, which is not ideal when the plan includes more than 1,000 still ahead. Water shaped nearly every stage of this routine. People needed it for drinking and cooking. Animals required quantities that could not simply be carried across long, dry stretches. Wheels and other wooden components also demanded attention in hot conditions. That made information valuable. A traveller who knew the next dependable water had an advantage over one trusting a vague guidebook. Companies questioned travellers, traders, soldiers near Fort Laramie, or people with local knowledge, but information aged quickly. A stream reported usable days earlier could be low now. A spring might be crowded. A waterhole might have been disturbed by hundreds of animals. A storm could raise a river. A dry period could turn a reliable stop into damp soil and hope. The map showed distance. It did not show what the last wagon train had consumed. This was the hidden competition beneath overland cooperation. Families needed one another, yet their animals competed for the same grass and water. A large company offered labour and protection, but it brought many mouths and hooves into camp. A strong team could push toward better grazing. A weaker family might stop where forage was poor because the animals could not continue. That poor camp weakened the team further. Failure could become circular. Weak animals caused short travel. Short travel led to poor camps. Poor camps produced weaker animals. The family did not need one spectacular disaster. It needed only several ordinary disadvantages reinforcing one another. Weather tightened the circle. A hot day increased thirst. Dust coated faces and food. Wind lifted the road until people walking behind a wagon could taste the traffic ahead. Then a storm arrived and changed the problem. Dust became mud. Low ground collected water. Canvas snapped under wind. Cooking fires became difficult. Bedding had to be protected. The road that punished lungs yesterday now held wagon wheels in place. The family woke to a landscape with the same name and different rules. Adults stepped into cold mud to pack. Children were told not to wander, then had to cross the same slippery ground carrying something useful. Wet rope tightened and grew heavy. The oxen leaned forward, and the wagon remained exactly where it was. More animals might be added. People pushed at the wheels. Cargo came out again. A barrel rolled aside. Bedding was carried to firmer ground. A flour sack passed from one pair of arms to another, while rain entered every space the canvas did not cover. The wagon finally rose from the rut with a sound suggesting either rescue or expensive damage. No one was certain which. Even successful movement created another task. The cargo had to be loaded again. Wet items needed drying. The team required recovery. The family had spent strength without gaining much distance. And yet distance remained the measure hanging over everything. The next reliable water was ahead. The next grazing place was ahead. Fort Laramie was ahead. Then the Sweetwater, South Pass, Fort Hall, the Snake River, the Blue Mountains, and Oregon beyond them. The season moved whether the wagon did or not. This pressure changed relations inside the company. A strong household might want to continue. A family with sick children might need to stop. A wagon with failing animals might ask everyone else to accept poor grazing. People who agreed to travel together discovered that the same road charged each household at a different rate. The landscape did not distribute hardship evenly. Money could buy a replacement animal where one was available. Strength could lift a wheel. Experience could identify better grazing. Social standing could make a complaint sound like leadership rather than delay. Other burdens were harder to see. The person cooking after the muddy extraction still had to produce food. The person nursing a sick child could not borrow another pair of arms. A child gathering fuel walked farther because earlier travellers had taken what lay near camp. Comfort disappeared first from the people whose work was easiest to overlook. By night, the company settles again near water. The oxen lower their heads to grass thinner than anyone hoped. A pot hangs over a small fire. Damp clothing is placed where smoke can reach it. Somewhere beyond the light, a livestock bell moves slowly through the dark. Tomorrow's journey is already being decided out there, not by the map, and not by the family's determination, but by how much the animals can eat before morning, and by who must remain awake to make sure they are still there when morning comes. The bell is still sounding when someone realizes one of the oxen has not risen. Morning has begun around it. Fires are being coaxed back to life. Blankets are rolled. Children are called closer. Other teams are already being gathered toward their yokes. But this animal remains on the ground. A driver approaches slowly, because panic is useful mainly for making tired people louder. He checks the animal's breathing, legs, shoulders, feet, and the skin beneath the yoke. Perhaps the ox is only exhausted. Perhaps a sore has worsened. Perhaps one hoof is injured. Perhaps the animal has eaten poorly for several days and reached the point where determination belongs to the humans, not to the body expected to obey it. The wagon waits. This is the moment when all the family's earlier choices return. How much weight remains inside? Is there a spare animal? Does another household have strength to lend? How far is the next post, settlement, or reliable grazing? How much food will be consumed while the family stays still? And most quietly of all, how willing is the company to wait? The simplest response is rest. If the animal can recover, a lost day may preserve the team. But rest has a cost. Food continues disappearing from sacks. The season continues changing. Other families may worry about grass, water, river levels, or the growing distance still ahead. A day that protects one wagon may endanger another. So the company discusses it. The conversation may be polite at first. Someone suggests waiting until noon. Another points out that the next camp is better. A third reminds everyone that weak animals are not improved by another 12 miles. People who left together under rules of cooperation now begin calculating which hardship belongs to the group and which belongs to the household unfortunate enough to suffer it. There is no perfect answer. If the company leaves too quickly, It exposes the struggling family to greater danger. If everyone stays too long, more animals may weaken on poor grazing. Mutual aid on the trail was real, but it existed beside self-interest, impatience, fear, and limited supplies. History becomes much easier when everyone behaves nobly after the fact. The road rarely enjoyed that convenience. The family begins by removing weight. A box comes down, then a sack. Bedding is unrolled and divided. A neighbour agrees to carry part of the food until the weak ox recovers. Another family takes a child into its wagon for the day. The load has not disappeared. It has become social. Every borrowed space, animal, tool, and favour ties the household more tightly to the people around it. For a family with spare stock, the problem may be manageable. Another ox is brought forward and fitted into the team. The weakened animal is allowed to travel loose, rest, or follow behind if able. But the replacement is not a wooden part that can be bolted into place. Animals have habits. A new ox may pull unevenly, resist the yoke, respond poorly to the driver, or fail to match its partner's pace. The team has to learn a new rhythm while dragging a household through ground that is already punishing. A fresh animal also represents money spent months earlier. Spare stock had to be purchased, fed, watched, watered, and protected all along the route. Families able to bring extra animals were not simply more cautious, they possessed more resources to turn caution into something physical. A poorer household might have no spare team and very little cash. Then the choice is narrow. The family can try to buy an animal from another emigrant, a trader, a fort, or a local supplier where one is available. Yet the seller understands the buyer's situation. An animal that would have seemed overpriced in Missouri can look strangely reasonable when the alternative is a stationary wagon several hundred miles from Oregon. Payment may come in cash, goods, labour, or another animal. And the replacement may be healthy, tired, old, untrained, or merely the least bad creature available. The family examines it anyway. Feet, shoulders, movement, and temperament now matter more than appearance. It is a negotiation over whether flour and children continue west. Trading also exposes inequality inside the household. Who controls the money? Who decides which goods can be exchanged? Whose possessions are considered expendable? A man may formally make the bargain, while a woman watches bedding, cookware, clothing, or food leave the wagon to pay for it. A hired hand may know the animals best, but have the least authority over the decision. The family survives through knowledge that may not speak first. If no replacement can be found, the company may redistribute the load. Several wagons take smaller portions. One team is double-yoked for a steep stretch. Men and older children walk beside the wheels and push when the road rises. Someone carries a child whose legs have given up. Someone else leads the weakened animal without knowing whether it will be useful again. The arrangement may last one hill or several days. It works only while the assisting households have enough strength to spare. This is why a single animal failure could spread across the company. The stronger teams pull more. Their animals tire faster. Their wagons carry additional weight. Their owners become less patient. Generosity itself consumes forage. The Sager family met this problem in 1844. Years later, Matilda and Elizabeth remembered the household abandoning goods and cutting down its large Tennessee wagon as grazing failed and the oxen thinned. The account is retrospective, but the physical choice is clear. The wagon had to become lighter than the family first intended. That is the line between repair and adaptation. At some point, the family may face a harsher decision. The animal cannot continue. If it is badly injured, severely weakened, or unlikely to recover, it may be left behind or, in some circumstances, slaughtered. The exact choice depends on condition, location, need, available labour, and whether any part of the loss can still be used. There is no need to turn the moment into spectacle. The important fact is what follows. The household now owns fewer options than it did yesterday. Another animal must absorb the work. Another wagon must take the load. Another purchase must be made, or the family must become smaller in material terms. The wagon is opened again. This time the sorting is less sentimental. A heavy tool may be useful, but only if the wagon moves far enough to need it. Extra cookware may be practical, but one pot can cook where three cannot travel. The chest may hold years of private history, but an ox does not recognize private history as a lighter category. Objects are placed on the ground. Some are offered to other travellers. Others remain near the road for the next family forced to make the same calculation. The trail becomes a museum of surrendered certainty. A person passing later sees a chair, a broken trunk, or an iron stove, and may laugh at the foolishness of whoever packed it. But the object may have travelled hundreds of miles before becoming impossible. Its owner may already have carried it farther than anyone expected. Most families did not begin with the right answer. They survived by changing it soon enough. By afternoon, the wagon moves again. The team is uneven. Part of the load belongs temporarily to neighbours. One animal follows slowly behind, or perhaps does not follow at all. The family has less property, less independence, and one more day of experience. Ahead, the road begins descending toward Fort Laramie, where a family might find news, supplies, a blacksmith, or the uncomfortable discovery that every repair costs more when the broken wagon is already sitting outside the door. The first warning is often a sound. Not a crash, not the clean snap people later remember, just a sharper note inside the ordinary creaking of the wagon. A dry scrape from the hub, a knock beneath the box, a loose iron tire tapping against wood. The family has listened to the wagon for so many miles that its noises have become part of the day. Canvas flaps, harness shifts, pots answer every rut, wheels complain in a language no one enjoys but everyone gradually learns. Then one sound changes. The driver raises a hand, the team slows. Someone walks beside the wheel and watches it turn. A wagon was designed to carry strain, but that did not mean it carried strain forever. Every mile pressed downward through the load and outward through the wheels. The axle bore weight. The hubs turned around it. Spokes transferred force. Iron tires held wooden rims together. The tongue carried the pull of the team into the vehicle. Nothing worked alone. A small failure in one part could spread into several. If a hub ran dry, friction created heat. If the wooden wheel dried and shrank, the iron tire could loosen. If a spoke weakened, the rim lost support. If the axle cracked, the whole wagon might lean before anyone understood how much wood had already failed inside it. This is why grease mattered. It was not glamorous cargo. Nobody crossed the plains because a grease bucket inspired them. But a family that neglected the hubs could turn a manageable maintenance task into a disabled wagon. At camp, a person might crouch beside the wheel, remove the linchpin, ease the wheel outward, inspect the axle end, and apply grease before fitting everything back into place. The work was dirty, repetitive, and easy to postpone after a long day. It was also tomorrow's movement. A well-maintained wagon could still break. Timber contained flaws. Iron loosened. Roads cut deep ruts. Riverbanks forced wheels against stones. Mud increased resistance. Steep descents drove the load forward, but maintenance created options before failure became complete. The family now hears that changed sound. The wheel is warm, the hub may be running dry, or something has shifted enough to rub. The wagon is unloaded partly so the wheel can be lifted. A lever is found. Several people push against the box while another blocks the remaining wheels. The household rises a few inches from the earth. Those inches require more labour than the final diary sentence will ever admit. A child holds a tool until told to move back. Someone keeps the oxen steady. Another person searches through packed goods for a spare pin that was placed somewhere safe months ago, which is often the most inaccessible location known to humanity. The wheel comes off. Now the damage can be seen. Perhaps the problem is minor. Fresh grease, a tightened piece of iron, a replacement pin, and careful reassembly may be enough. Perhaps the problem is not minor. A cracked spoke can be repaired or replaced if suitable wood, tools, time, and skill are available. A damaged rim may need reinforcement. A loosened iron tyre may be reset by a blacksmith where such help exists. A broken axle can require lifting the wagon, removing the old piece, shaping or fitting another, and trusting the repair over miles of uneven ground. The difference between delay and abandonment may be one person who knows how to do that. Skill travelled unevenly. Some emigrants had farm, carpentry, blacksmithing, or wagon experience. Others had prepared by buying tools without acquiring the calm knowledge needed to use them under pressure. Owning an auger was not the same as knowing where to bore, and a hammer became less impressive when the broken part required judgment rather than enthusiasm. Look around your room and choose one object heavy enough to matter, but useful enough to justify carrying for another 1,000 miles. Now add the tools needed to repair the thing carrying it. The wagon tongue could fail too. It extended forward from the wagon and connected the vehicle to the team. On rough ground, in tight turns, or under strain, damage there threatened control as much as movement. A broken tongue could leave the animals standing ahead of a wagon that no longer knew how to follow them. The king bolt and reach beneath the box mattered for the same reason. They helped the front assembly turn while keeping the running gear connected. Wear, looseness, or a lost fastener could turn steering into another emergency. A driver might hear the change before seeing it, a knock during turns, a pull that no longer felt centered, or a front wheel beginning to track badly. The wheel did not need optimism. It needed grease, sound wood, fitted iron, and every small piece still where it belonged. Then there were brakes, chains, and drag devices. On steep descents, the danger reversed. The animals were no longer only pulling the wagon, they were trying to keep the loaded vehicle from running into them. Wheels might be locked or chained. A log, branch, or other drag could create friction. Ropes could help control the descent. The machine that had spent months resisting movement now had to be prevented from moving too freely. A family reached the top of a grade and looked down. The road narrowed. Stones weighted below. The weight inside the wagon pressed forward before the team had taken a step. People removed cargo again. Some walked below or beside the vehicle. Chains were checked. The animals were positioned carefully. No one wanted speed now. The wagon descended by controlled hesitation, its wheels scraping rather than rolling cleanly. Wood strained, iron tightened. The team leaned against the load. The same wheel that caused panic when it refused to turn could injure animals and people if allowed to turn without restraint. That was the lesson hidden inside the machinery. Survival did not always mean making the wagon move. Sometimes it meant stopping it. Sometimes it meant unloading it. Sometimes it meant dismantling part of it, carrying the pieces forward and rebuilding later. For now, this repair holds. The wheel is fitted back onto the axle. The wagon lowers. Cargo returns in a lighter arrangement. The team leans into the yoke, and the vehicle begins moving with a sound everyone listens to more carefully than before. Fort Laramie may offer ironwork, parts, and practiced hands. It may also reveal how quickly mechanical need becomes a market. A wagon can break in a moment. The price of making it move again is decided by people. The line outside the blacksmith's work does not look like a market at first. It looks like 3 damaged wagons, several tired families, a pile of iron, and one person whose time has become more valuable with every cracked axle arriving from the east. A wheel waits without its tyre. A wagon tongue lies on the ground. Someone holds a bolt whose missing replacement has delayed an entire household. The owners possess tools. What they may not possess is the right skill, the right part, or enough money to move ahead in the queue. Forts and trading posts could provide supplies, wagon components, food, clothing, and repair work. They also sat at places where travellers had fewer alternatives. A family arriving with a split axle was not bargaining from a position of elegance. The blacksmith explains what can be repaired. The trader explains what the iron will cost. The family explains what it can pay. Cash is simplest. Many households do not have enough. Then, goods are examined. A tool might be traded. Food might be sold, though selling food to repair the vehicle carrying the remaining food has a certain circular quality. Clothing, livestock, or labour may enter the bargain. The trail has converted a mechanical problem into a question of class. A wealthier household can choose a durable repair. A poorer one may accept a patch expected to hold only until the next post. Better timber, or a place where the wagon can be abandoned more safely. Temporary does not mean foolish. A temporary repair becomes dangerous only when hope is asked to perform the job of inspection. The repaired part has to be watched. At every halt, finding. Hands search for new movement. Ears listen for the return of that altered sound. The wagon may be unloaded before a steep climb and reloaded afterward, because the repair can support travel, but not pride. Some families never reach a formal repair point. Beside the road, a company pools knowledge. One traveller understands animals, another can shape wood. Someone owns spare chain, another has a pin close enough to fit. A hired worker may have more practical understanding than the man whose name appears as wagon owner. That changes authority, at least for the length of the crisis. The person who can fit the part becomes difficult to ignore. A woman accustomed to farm repairs may recognise that a proposed solution will not hold. A labourer may know the team needs rest before the wagon can be tested. An older child may remember where the only spare bolt was packed. The record may later name the household head. The repair may have depended on everyone else. A cracked axle requires timber, time, and several bodies. The wagon is raised and supported. The old piece is removed. A replacement must be selected and shaped. Fresh wood may shrink as it dries. So the fit that looks secure beside the road must be checked again after miles of heat and vibration. Two adults walk toward a stand of trees carrying an axe and saw. Another remains with the wagon. Children are kept away from the raised box, because a wagon balanced on improvised supports has no respect for family hierarchy. The oxen graze nearby. They are resting, but they are also consuming the grass the company may need that evening. Every hour of repair spends something. Time is being spent. Food is being spent. Forage is being spent. The patience of neighbouring families is being spent too. Some companies agree to wait. Others divide. A few wagons may continue toward the next camp while helpers remain behind. The choice depends on distance, weather, grazing, illness, and how closely the travellers believe their futures are tied together. A company is not a permanent rescue institution. It is a temporary agreement among households under pressure. That makes every act of assistance meaningful and uncertain. One family lends a chain, another provides a jack or lever. Someone who worked with wood before the journey helps shape the replacement. A traveller with blacksmithing knowledge examines the iron fittings and decides which can be reused. The owners provide labour, food, or future help in return. Nothing is formally priced, but little is truly free. The debt may be repaid at a river crossing, during illness, while searching for lost cattle, or when the lending family hears its own axle make a suspicious sound weeks later. Mutual aid works partly because everyone can imagine needing it. The replacement timber arrives. It is dragged back to the road, cut closer to size, and laid beside the damaged axle. Shavings collect in the dirt. Measurements are checked. The old iron fittings must be removed carefully enough to use again. A child turns one curved piece of iron over in both hands until an adult takes it away. Small components decide large journeys. A missing bolt can stop a wagon carrying more than 1,000 pounds. A lost linchpin can make an entire wheel temporary. A chain can hold together a repair that would otherwise fail before noon. This was why emigrants carried spare parts, despite the hatred of weight. Spokes, pins, bolts, rope, chain, grease, and tools occupied space that could have held food or bedding. They needed the parts. They also had to pull those parts over every mile before anything broke. Near dusk, The new axle is lifted into place. Several people raise the wagon box. Supports groan. The old timber comes free. Iron fittings are transferred. The replacement is pushed, adjusted, removed, trimmed, and fitted again. Nobody enjoys the second fitting, but the wagon is not interested in morale. At last, the wheels return. The vehicle is lowered cautiously. For a moment, nothing happens. That is success. The wagon does not lean. The axle does not split. The wheels carry the load, while the family repacks only what the repaired structure should safely bear. Some objects stay behind. A wooden chest is broken apart for useful boards. Iron hardware is saved. A piece of furniture becomes repair material for the machine that was supposed to carry it. The household is consuming its old form to preserve its moving one. By morning, the company prepares to leave. The repaired wagon joins the line slowly. Its owners watch every rotation. The helpers reclaim tools, animals, and borrowed space. No one gives a speech about community. People simply begin walking. But the journey has changed. The family now knows that survival can depend on another traveller's chain, a stranger's skill, a blacksmith's price, usable timber, and several tired households surrendering half a day. The road ahead is no longer only distance. It is a moving market of labour, information, favours, authority, supplies, and debt. By the time the company reaches the Snake River, information has become cargo. At Three Island Crossing, the water does not merely separate one bank from another, it separates two versions of the journey. If conditions allow a crossing through the islands, the company can reach the more favourable route north of the river toward Fort Boise. If the water is too dangerous, travellers may remain on the hotter, sandier southern side. A difference measured on the map in a few lines may be measured by the oxen in days of strength. So people ask who has crossed recently, who knows the current, whose animals can manage it, who owns rope, and who can afford to wait. The trail has become an economy. A rider approaches and reports that another company crossed yesterday. The news moves through camp faster than breakfast. Some people believe him, others trust an older guidebook. A captain prefers caution. A trader claims another place is better, though he may also have something to sell there. The river is in front of them, but rumour has already moved several miles beyond it. Information was valuable because the road changed constantly. A campsite could be exhausted. A bridge could wash away. A ford considered safe last week could become deep and fast after rain. A cut-off praised by one traveller could punish the next company with mud, steep grades, or poor water. Printed guidance helped, but no book could update itself overnight. The family therefore depended on emigrants, traders, local residents, native travellers, ferry operators, and others who knew pieces of the country ahead. Not all information was accurate. Not all of it was offered freely, and not every family possessed equal confidence when deciding whose knowledge counted. A man with formal authority might be heard over someone with better practical experience. A hired driver could understand the teams, but lack influence in the company vote. A woman who had been measuring food, watching weather, and caring for weakened family members might recognize that another delay was dangerous, yet the public decision could still be made without her voice carrying the same weight. The trail did not erase social rules. It made their consequences harder to hide. At the landing, wagons gather near the Snake River. The bank is churned by hooves and wheels. Animals pull toward the water. Children are kept back. Adults walk along the edge looking for the safest approach. People who know the crossing explain what the current is doing. Payment may be expected for assistance, boats, ferries, or local services. Now the family must convert property into passage. Cash is easiest if they have it. If they do not, the conversation becomes slower. A tool may be traded. Food may be exchanged. Labour may be offered. Another household may lend money, knowing the debt will travel west with both families. The crossing is not merely transportation. It is an institution with rules, waiting order, skill, and authority over who moves first. The household that felt independent on open ground becomes a customer at the water's edge. The ferry has no polished office, but it already understands surge pricing. Cargo is removed or rearranged. Animals may cross separately. Ropes are checked. People watch the current. A wagon that seemed enormous on land looks unexpectedly small when the river takes hold of it. Several adults stand ready downstream. The family waits until the wheels reach the opposite bank. Then everyone exhales and begins repacking. Because survival, apparently, enjoys paperwork without the paper. The cost of the crossing is not finished when payment ends. Time has been lost. Animals have worked. Bedding may be damp. Food has been handled again. The next campsite must still be reached, and another family remains on the eastern bank without enough money. Now the company discovers what its promises mean. Will several households contribute? Will assistance be exchanged for labour? Will the family sell an animal, reducing its ability to travel after crossing? Will the company leave them behind? The answer reveals the moving society more clearly than any written constitution. Rules existed because cooperation could not be assumed. Some companies elected captains, assigned guard duty, settled disputes, or agreed on travel practices. Yet authority remained limited. A captain could recommend and persuade. He could not create grass, repair every wagon, or make frightened households value the same risk. The company's real power came from dependency. A person who ignored the group might lose help later. A family that repeatedly delayed others could be excluded. Someone accused of taking more than a fair share of water, grazing, or labour might discover that judgment travels faster than the wagon. Reputation became a form of currency. The reliable carpenter was valuable. The careful driver was trusted. The household that shared food might receive help during illness. The person who promised assistance and disappeared when lifting began was remembered with remarkable efficiency. Children learned these rankings without attending any meeting. They knew which wagon carried medicine, which adult told frightening stories, which family had coffee, and who could be asked for help without producing a speech about responsibility first. Women often maintained another layer of exchange beneath formal company decisions. Food, childcare, nursing, sewing, and advice moved between households. These exchanges might never appear in rules or leadership lists, yet they allowed adults to perform the more visible work of driving, repairing, scouting, and negotiating. A mother caring for a feverish child could not also gather fuel, prepare every meal, watch livestock, and repack the wagon alone. Another woman might take over part of that work. An older child might supervise younger ones. A neighbour might share prepared food. That labour was not always repaid equally. A helpful woman could become the person everyone approached whenever care was needed. A skilled worker could be borrowed until exhaustion. A poorer family might repay assistance through days of labour, while a wealthier one settled the same kind of debt with cash. Cooperation reduced danger. It did not remove hierarchy. This is the point where the Oregon Trail begins to look different. It is no longer a line of separate families proving their independence against nature. It is a moving settlement before the settlement exists. There are rules without a courthouse, prices without a permanent market, debts without a bank, repairs without a workshop, childcare without a school, medical care without a hospital, and public judgment without much privacy. Every campsite briefly becomes a town. Then, by morning, the town is dismantled. Fires are buried. Animals are gathered. Bedding is rolled. The road takes the population forward and leaves tracks. Ash, damaged grass, discarded objects, and whatever could not continue. The family with the repaired axle now owes help to others. The family whose child rode elsewhere owes gratitude that may later become labour. The household that borrowed money at the crossing carries a debt as real as any iron tool. And all of them depend on information about the weather ahead. That dependence will soon become dangerous, because a moving economy can redistribute food, animals, tools, and work. It cannot redistribute lost days beyond the Snake River. Clouds are gathering over a road already softened by earlier rain. The company can negotiate almost everything except the season. The first drops darken the dust before anyone agrees that the storm is serious. A driver looks west. Another family tightens its canvas. Someone decides there is still time to reach better ground before the rain arrives. Then the wind changes. Canvas snaps. Oxen lift their heads. Loose objects disappear beneath wagon covers. Children are called closer. The company that had spent the morning arguing over pace now begins moving with the sudden cooperation produced by weather that has no interest in the vote. Rain reaches the road all at once. Dry ruts fill. Dust becomes a dark paste around the wheels. The first wagons pass before the ground softens completely. Those behind inherit deeper tracks, heavier mud, and animals already tired from trying to keep up. The same road now charges each wagon differently. A lightly loaded vehicle pushes through. A heavier one sinks near the hub. Its oxen lean forward, hooves sliding. The driver calls to them, but the wagon does not move. Several people return with a chain. Another team is brought alongside. Cargo comes down beneath blankets and canvas. Flour must be protected. Bedding must remain dry enough to use that night. A chest can wait in the rain if it has finally developed the wisdom to contain nothing edible. The combined teams pull. The wagon rises from the rut, moves several feet, and sinks again. No one has travelled far, but animals and people have spent the strength required for miles. Weather rarely needed to destroy the company in one dramatic act. It only had to make every ordinary task slower. Wet wood was heavier. Fires were harder to start. Clothing dried poorly. Riverbanks became slick. Animals needed longer to recover. Repairs took place with cold fingers and tools disappearing into mud. By evening, the company camps earlier than planned. The grass is acceptable, but the ground beneath the wagons is soaked. Families search for the least wet place to spread bedding. Smoke hangs low because damp fuel refuses to behave like respectable firewood. A pot takes longer to boil. Children become cold. Someone discovers water dripping through a seam in the wagon cover and places a container beneath it, creating the 19th century version of indoor plumbing without any of the confidence. The company has lost half a day. That does not sound fatal, but it joins the hours lost to the weak ox, the cracked axle, the missing cattle, and the crowded crossing. Tyne-det has begun to travel with them. Earlier on the Platte, heat and dust were the main enemies. Dry air shrank wheelwood. Water demand climbed. Travellers walked behind wagons inside a cloud built from every hoof and wheel ahead of them. Past Fort Hall and along the Snake River country, weather changed the river itself. Rain falling somewhere upstream could alter a crossing beneath a clear local sky. A company might reach the bank expecting shallow water and find a brown current moving faster than the guidebook promised. Farther west, toward the Blue Mountains and the Cascades, cold rain shortened the day. Forage became harder to find. Mud punished already repaired wagons. A delay that had once been uncomfortable began to carry the possibility of snow. The farther west the families travelled, the fewer ways remained to recover a lost week. The next morning after the storm, the road may still be too soft. Leaving early could damage wagons and exhaust teams. Waiting allows the ground to dry, that spends food and grazing. Once again, there is no answer that remains correct for every household. The strongest teams can move sooner. The family with a temporary axle repair may need firmer ground. A sick child benefits from rest. A household low on provisions fears every stationary meal. The weather has not created one problem. It has made all the existing differences more expensive. When the rain finally passes, heat may return. The wet road hardens into ridges. Mud dries around wheels, boots, and wagon parts. Water stands in low places, while the open trail begins giving it back to the sky. Then dust rises again. It enters the wagon through canvas seams. It coats food, faces, hair, and bedding. Travellers wrap cloth over mouths or turn away from the wagons ahead. The road becomes visible in the air. Heat alters the machinery too. Wooden wheels dry, components shrink. Iron tires can loosen around the rims they were meant to hold together. At camp, a traveller inspects the wheel and finds a thin space where iron no longer grips wood as firmly as it should. Water is carried over. The wheel is soaked or kept damp, while a more permanent solution is considered. The same water is needed for cooking, drinking, washing, and livestock. The bucket stands between the family and 4 different failures. This is where daily survival becomes calculation rather than heroism. How much water can be spared for the wheel? How far until the next source? Will the iron hold until a blacksmith is found? Can the load be reduced again? The family chooses, then watches the result. A rising river can hold a company for days. During that delay, animals consume nearby grass. Prices increase, food falls, tempers shorten. Families debate whether to risk the water, seek another crossing, or remain where everyone else has already reduced the campsite's resources. Waiting can be safer and still become dangerous. At the Dalles, the choice narrows again. Families can attempt the Columbia River route or, after the Barlow Road opens, try the longer overland passage around Mount Hood. Neither choice removes weather. One places wagons and people near difficult river travel. The other sends them into steep, wet, forested country where mud, cold, and descent can punish every weakened part of the system. A family may be surprisingly close to Oregon and still face its most dangerous timing problem. The destination does not pull the wagon closer. Every remaining mile must still be crossed. This is when earlier choices return with unusual clarity. The heavy chest kept too long. The extra day spent waiting for an animal that never recovered. The cut-off chosen on uncertain advice. The repair made cheaply because the better one cost too much. None of those decisions alone caused the weather, but each one helped decide where the family would be when the weather arrived. That is the real danger of the seasonal window. Failure accumulates quietly before cold gives it a deadline. At camp, the family studies the remaining food. The animals are thinner. The repaired wheel is holding, though not confidently. A child sleeps beneath bedding that never fully dried after the river. The adults discuss distance, routes, and what can still be removed from the wagon. Beyond the firelight, rain begins again. This time, the question is no longer whether the household can preserve everything it carried west. The question is, how much of that household must disappear before the people inside it can reach the mountains in time? The decision begins before anyone touches the cargo. For several minutes, the adults simply look into the wagon. Everything inside once survived an earlier sorting. These are not the obviously foolish objects abandoned near the Missouri River. The family has already surrendered furniture, extra cookware, clothing, and whatever else the road exposed as too heavy. What remains has earned its place. That is what makes the next reduction harder. A flour sack still means food. Bedding still means warmth. A tool still means repair. A chest may hold legal papers, letters, clothing, medicine, all the few objects that allow the family to imagine it is moving a home rather than dismantling one. But the oxen are thinner now. The road is wetter. Cold is arriving. The wagon does not care how carefully each item was chosen. Weight presses downward without sentiment. The family begins with the easiest things. A damaged chair component. A second basin. A box containing objects no one has opened for weeks. Each piece is lifted, discussed, and placed on the ground. Then the easy choices end. A heavy tool may save the wagon later. It may also help destroy the team today. Extra blankets may protect children in mounting cold, but the animals must first carry those blankets into the mountains. Food is too valuable to discard casually, yet food is often among the heaviest remaining cargo. The road has created a deeply unfair examination in which every correct answer can become wrong 10 miles later. One adult argues for keeping the tools. Another points to the weather. Someone counts the remaining sacks. Someone else looks at the children and stops counting aloud. The objects on the ground begin to form a second household. There is a cooking pot, a wooden box, folded clothing, part of a bed frame, and a book whose pages have travelled farther west than many people ever will. Arranged together, they look almost ready for use. That appearance is misleading. Without animals, food, labour, and time, they are no longer a household. They are materials waiting for weather. Some possessions can be traded instead of abandoned. A nearby family may want a tool, blanket, or container. A trader may accept goods for food, an animal, or a repair. But usefulness does not guarantee a fair price. The seller needs weight removed immediately. The buyer knows it. A carefully made object can lose most of its value between one river and the next. This is not because the object has changed. The system around it has. A chest worth keeping at home may be worth almost nothing where everyone already owns a chest and nobody wants to pull another one uphill. A spare chain, by contrast, may become more valuable than a piece of furniture that took months to make. The trail rearranges wealth according to emergency. One family offers a bag of dried food in exchange for a tool. Another agrees to carry a child if the struggling household takes less weight elsewhere. A small quantity of flour may purchase help because hunger has become more persuasive than craftsmanship. Negotiation happens beside the road while rain gathers on canvas. There is no shop, no stable price, and no guarantee that either family will meet again after the next morning. Trust has to be built quickly. So does suspicion. People remember who increased a price during desperation. They also remember who gave something away when refusal would have been understandable. Reputation continues west, even when furniture does not. Not every object is left intact. A chest can be broken apart for boards. Iron hardware is removed and saved. Leather straps are cut free. A damaged wagon may become a supply of bolts, wood, chain, canvas, and wheel parts for vehicles still moving. The machine is dismantled into future repairs. This is one reason abandoned wagons could attract attention. They were not only symbols of failure, they were material banks. A traveller who found a usable pin, iron fitting, spoke, rope, or board might preserve another family's movement. The original owners had lost the object, but not necessarily its usefulness. The chair that crossed several hundred miles is now applying for permanent residence beside the road. The family examines the wagon itself. Can the box be shortened? Can a damaged section be removed? Can supplies be transferred to another vehicle? Is the wagon still carrying enough essential material to justify the strain it places on the remaining team? These questions would have sounded unthinkable at departure. The wagon represented the journey. Abandoning it could feel like abandoning the plan, the investment, and the visible proof that the family belonged among the emigrants moving west. Yet the title of wagon owner is not especially useful if the wagon prevents arrival. The later recollections of Matilda and Elizabeth Sager return here. They remembered their large wagon being reduced after thin animals and scarce grazing made the original vehicle too costly to keep. The exact emotions of the moment are not preserved for us to invent. The physical choice is enough. The wagon's old form had become more dangerous than its value. A household may continue with fewer goods in another family's vehicle. It may place essentials on pack animals. Adults and older children may carry more. People may divide temporarily, sending stronger travellers ahead for help while others wait. Each adaptation makes the family less recognisable as the unit that left home. That change can be mistaken for defeat. It may actually be survival becoming practical. The burden of deciding is not shared equally. The person formerly recognised as household head may announce which property stays, but another person may have packed it, used it, repaired it, or expected to depend on it. A woman may lose the cookware or bedding that supports her daily labour. A hired worker may surrender tools he knows will be needed. A child may watch an object connected to home placed beside the road without being asked what it means. Property belongs differently, even when law gives one person control over it. The records rarely preserve every disagreement. A diary may state that the load was lightened. It may not say who argued, who cried, who became angry, or who silently understood the necessity first. Exact emotions cannot be invented, but the structure of the decision is clear enough. Someone gives up more than pounds. The family finally returns the remaining cargo to the wagon. The floor is visible in places where boxes once stood. Bedding is tied more tightly. Food is placed where it can be reached. Tools are reduced to the ones judged most important. The wagon rises slightly on its suspension. The oxen lean into the yoke. This time, the wheels move with less resistance. Behind them, objects remain in a wet line beside the trail. Another company may sort through them. Rain may damage them. Grass may grow around them. Some will be remembered in stories as evidence that emigrants packed foolishly. That judgment is convenient because it begins after the difficult choice has already been made. A family arrived at the point where preserving property threatened the people who owned it. So the property stopped travelling. The wagon continues with less weight and less illusion. Soon, even that calculation will be tested, because the lighter wagon still contains bodies that must cook, walk, nurse, lift, guard, and keep moving. And some of those bodies have been paying more of the journey's cost than the records usually admit. The lighter wagon does not make the day light. It only changes who carries what the wagon no longer does. A blanket removed from the box may now be tied across someone's shoulders. A child who once rode during the worst hours may be asked to walk farther. A cooking pot saved from the roadside still has to be filled, scrubbed, and packed again. The household has reduced its cargo, but the work inside it remains almost the same. That work begins before sunrise. Someone revives the fire. Someone walks for water. Someone searches for animals in grass silvered by morning cold. Someone wakes children who did not sleep well and persuades them to eat before the company begins moving. 19th century expectations commonly divided labour by gender. Men more often drove teams, repaired wagons, handled livestock, stood guard, scouted routes, and occupied formal positions in the company. Women more often cooked, washed, mended clothing, cared for children, managed food, and nursed the sick. These were expectations, not perfect rules. Illness, death, widowhood, injury, skill, and necessity rearranged them. Women drove teams and dealt with animals. Men cooked or cared for children when circumstances required it. Still, some labour was easier to describe as survival than other labour. Repairing an axle looked urgent. Preparing 3 meals every day for months could disappear into the background. Standing guard sounded dangerous. Keeping a feverish child alive through a wet night could be recorded in one quiet sentence, if it was recorded at all. A family stops near the Blue Mountains because a child is sick. The company may prefer to continue. The animals need grass farther ahead. The weather is changing. No one wants to lose another afternoon. But the child cannot simply be tightened with rope and checked again at the next camp. Bedding is spread inside the wagon. Water is brought. The caregiver remains close while others discuss distance and timing outside. That person now carries 2 pressures. One is the sick child. The other is the knowledge that every hour of care may be judged as delay. A wagon company benefits from speed, while a household may need to stop for one vulnerable person. When movement resumes, the sick ride. Someone else walks. The substitution sounds simple until the road stretches for miles through heat, dust, mud, or cold rain. The person walking may also be the one who cooked before departure and will prepare camp after arrival. Labour stacks. It does not politely replace itself. Children carried part of the journey too. Depending on age and household, they might gather fuel, carry water, watch younger siblings, help herd animals, lead stock, or walk beside the wagon for long hours. Very young children required protection near animals, rivers, wheels, tools, and fires. A wagon camp offered an impressive variety of ways for a child to be injured before breakfast. Older children might be treated as workers when the household needed labour, and as children when adults wanted obedience. Their usefulness increased faster than their authority. A boy sent to find missing cattle could become responsible for the company's departure time. A girl caring for younger siblings allowed an adult to cook, nurse, repair, or negotiate. Neither task may appear prominently in an adult diary. The record often preserves the movement of the wagon better than the movement of the people around it. Hired hands and servants could carry another unequal burden. A family with money might employ someone to drive or handle animals. That worker's knowledge could be essential, especially if the household head had little practical experience. Yet expertise did not guarantee control over route choices, spending, rest, or risk. The person who understood that the team needed another day of recovery might still be ordered forward. The person who repaired the wheel might not own the wagon it saved. Free black travellers. Enslaved people taken west. Servants and labourers did not all experience the family journey as a voluntary or equal project. Legal status, race, property rights, and control over destination shaped whose survival counted as personal freedom and whose labour served another person's plan. The same road could carry a family seeking opportunity and a person denied meaningful choice about travelling with them. Authority also affected who surrendered comfort first. If bedding had to be reduced, whose blanket was judged extra? If food became scarce, who ate less? If someone had to walk, who was expected to endure it quietly? If a child needed care, whose other work stretched later into the night? The sources rarely answer consistently, but dependency makes the questions necessary. A household head could announce that everyone must make sacrifices. The sacrifices did not necessarily weigh the same. At camp, visible work ends before invisible work does. The wagon is placed, animals are unyoked, some adults inspect a repair, discuss the next route, or help with stock. Meanwhile, water is carried, food prepared, bedding arranged, clothing examined, and children settled. A woman kneels near the fire with smoke in her eyes. The meal is simple, but simplicity does not cook itself. Fuel may be damp, water may have come from a distance, flour must be protected from rain, dust, insects, and careless hands. Then utensils are cleaned with limited water. Food is repacked. Anything left open becomes an invitation to animals, weather, and every child who suddenly remembers being hungry. There is dry humour in a household carrying itself across a continent and still spending part of each evening searching for one missing spoon. There is also exhaustion. Pregnancy, childbirth, menstruation, illness, and recovery did not pause because the route was inconvenient. These subjects should not become spectacle, but they belong to the physical history of migration. Privacy was limited, medical knowledge and assistance varied. A struggling household could become dependent on women's experience, neighbouring care, or whatever help was available. The record may simply note that the company stopped. Care created social bonds that formal rules could not. Women exchanged food, information, remedies, childcare, and nursing. Older children moved between wagons. A widowed parent might depend on neighbours. After a death or severe illness, surviving children and supplies could be absorbed temporarily into other households. The wagon company became most real when one family could no longer perform all the work required to remain a family. But assistance had limits. The person known for nursing could be called repeatedly. The strongest workers lifted every broken wagon. The reliable child received more duties. Competence attracted need, and need produced fatigue. By the time the company reaches camp, the lighter wagon has travelled farther. The animals are tired, but still moving. The repair holds. The family appears to be recovering. Inside that appearance, one adult has walked most of the day, after sleeping beside a sick child. Another has managed the team and then checked the axle. An older child carries water, while watching two younger ones. A hired worker searches for grazing beyond the firelight. This is how survival often distributed itself. One person's rest was made possible by another person's wakefulness. One family's speed was made possible by someone cooking before dawn. One repaired wagon was made possible by hands the diary never names. Morning comes again. The company must choose between two routes toward the next water. One is described as shorter. The other is said to have better grass. The map offers lines. What the travellers need now is living knowledge of the land ahead, and much of that knowledge belongs to people whose presence the later pioneer story too often pushes to the edge. The line on the map is not empty. Long before the wagon company reaches the next river, people already know where the water rises, where grass holds longer in dry weather, which bank is easier to approach, and which crossing becomes dangerous after rain. That knowledge does not belong to the emigrants simply because they have arrived needing it. The routes west cross the homelands of many native nations. Paths used by wagon companies often followed older corridors of travel, trade, hunting, communication, and diplomacy. Rivers had names, crossings had histories, and valleys that looked open in an emigrant diary were not waiting to be discovered. The family sees riders before it sees the river. They appear along a ridge or approach camp across open ground. The emigrants watch them with a mixture of curiosity and fear, shaped by rumours heard months earlier. Children are called nearer. A few adults reach toward weapons, sometimes before anyone has offered a threat. That reflex matters because many surviving journals tell us as much about emigrant expectations as they do about the people being described. Most encounters between overlanders and native people were peaceful. Trade was common. Native families sold or exchanged food, moccasins, horses, information, and services. They assisted at difficult crossings and, in some places, used boats, ferries, or local knowledge to help move people and property across water. Yet emigrant stories often gave violence more space than ordinary assistance. Fear was memorable. A purchased meal could become one line. A rumour could occupy a page. Rebecca Ketchum's 1853 journal preserves one of those ordinary but important lines. She recorded buying potatoes and dried peas from Nez Perce people. The detail is not a dramatic rescue. It is a meal. That is precisely why it matters. Fresh produce could be difficult to find after months on the road. Potatoes and peas placed in a cooking pot were calories, variety, and relief purchased from people already living in the country the emigrants were crossing. A child watches the pot. An adult asks how much remains. The food is consumed, and the wagon continues. The transaction may occupy only a few words in the journal. Its effect travels farther. At another riverbank, the company learns how much missing lines can matter. The water is too deep for an easy ford. The current pushes branches past the landing. The animals hesitate near the bank. Someone who knows the crossing indicates a safer approach and explains how the wagons can be moved. Payment is expected. Several emigrants complain. This is an interesting position from which to object to a service. Standing beside a river, you cannot cross without it. The price may be discussed in goods rather than cash. Clothing, food, tools, or other trade items change hands. The crossing is organised. People unload part of the wagon, secure the cargo, and move children away from the most dangerous edge. Local knowledge turns an obstacle into a process. One wagon goes first. The family watches its remaining flour and bedding move onto the water. The craft sits low. Hands steady it. The current pulls sideways. But the people guiding the crossing understand where the force will be strongest. On the far bank, cargo is lifted out again. Nothing about the scene resembles an isolated household conquering nature. It resembles a transaction between people with different resources. The emigrants possess manufactured goods, wagons, livestock, and money in varying amounts. The people already living there possess knowledge of the river, local food systems, routes, seasons, animals, and terrain. Survival occurs where those resources meet. The bargain may still be unequal, tense, or misunderstood. Not every encounter was friendly. Native communities had good reasons to become increasingly resistant as wagon traffic grew. Thousands of emigrants brought livestock that consumed grass, used water, disturbed hunting grounds, cut fuel, spread disease, and treated indigenous land as a road to property farther west. The wagon company experiences the trail as temporary. The people whose homelands it crosses experience the consequences after the wagons leave. That difference changes the meaning of every campsite. The emigrants may see grass and ask whether their oxen can eat it. A native family may see the same grass as part of a seasonal landscape tied to animals, travel, gathering, and survival. The emigrants may see a river crossing as a delay. Local people may see a place of trade, danger, memory, and control. The same ground can hold two histories at once, though only one was often printed later as the national adventure. A worn shoe explains the dependence clearly. After months of walking, leather thins and seams open. Dust enters. Stones find the tender place with irritating accuracy. A traveller who acquires moccasins or other locally made footwear is not collecting a souvenir. The person is solving a body problem that can become a movement problem. Sore feet slow the walker. A slower walker affects the wagon. The wagon affects the company. A small trade reaches outward through the entire system. Information works the same way. A native traveller warns that water is scarce ahead, or points toward a better route, or indicates where animals can cross. The advice may save hours, food, and animal strength. But the emigrant record may reduce the person to a brief label, misspell a name, confuse one nation with another, or preserve no name at all. The diary remembers the information. It forgets the source. This is where historical caution becomes part of the story rather than an interruption to it. Most surviving trail journals were written by emigrants. They preserve what those writers noticed, feared, valued, or chose to record. They do not give us direct access to the thoughts of every native person watching the wagon traffic pass. We should not invent those thoughts. We can still see the structure. The route crossed inhabited land. The newcomers needed local knowledge. Trade and assistance were common. The migration placed growing pressure on native communities, and the later settlement system transformed temporary passage into permanent dispossession. The family moving toward Oregon may not yet understand the full political machinery behind its destination. It thinks in terms of land, survival, weather, and arrival. But federal claims, settler laws, treaties, and expanding occupation will decide whose ownership receives recognition once the wagons stop. A household can be vulnerable on the trail and still participate in a larger system that harms others. History allows both facts to remain true. The child cold beside the river deserves care. The native family facing traffic through its homeland deserves presence rather than being reduced to danger, helper, or scenery. The company camps after the crossing. Oxen graze near land already used by others. A meal includes food purchased that afternoon. Damp bedding is spread. The adults discuss the route as though the information now belongs naturally to the group. Beyond the wagons, the people who supplied that knowledge continue with lives the diary may never describe. By morning, the company moves again. It carries fuller stomachs, drier feet, and a safer understanding of the road ahead. It also carries old fears and new arguments. Some travellers now trust the guidance they received. Others insist on a shorter cut-off, described by a confident white guide. A few families want to remain with the established route. Others fear they have already lost too much time. The map offers both lines, without accepting responsibility for either one. And as the wagons gather for another company decision, the knowledge already present on the land begins competing with pride, rumour, authority, and the dangerous promise of a faster road. The promise of a faster road divides the company before anyone leaves camp. One group believes the cut-off will recover lost days. Another points to the animals, the repaired wagons, and the fact that shortcuts often become longer after everyone commits to them. A family with strong teams sees opportunity. A household nursing a sick child sees risk. The captain listens while every speaker describes the same route as though it offers a different future. Maps cannot settle the argument. Neither can confidence. The company remembers who misjudged water, lent animals, refused help, or needed repeated repairs. Trust has a ledger. In 1846, 65-year-old Tabitha Brown reached Fort Hall as her travelling party divided. Some relatives continued toward the Columbia. Brown's group followed Jesse Applegate and a southern route promoted as a faster way into settlement. The decision answered real pressure. Weak animals, shrinking provisions, lost time, and approaching cold. Brown described it later. so the account must remain recollection rather than invented dialogue. Still, the structure is clear. One route promised separated relatives and placed households inside different versions of the same season. The cut-off was shorter in the promise. The animals and food had to test it on the ground. The families favouring the new route tighten loads and gather stock. Others examine the main trail and ask whether predictability is now worth more than speed. Geography becomes community. If the company splits, each group loses labour, spare parts, knowledge, animals, guards, and potential caregivers. It also loses delays and people whose emergencies consume shared resources. Separation can feel like freedom until the first broken axle. Some households do not truly choose. Failing oxen, illness, employment, or dependence on another wagon may decide the route before any vote does. The company counts adults, the road counts dependencies. By morning, the wagons form two lines. Tools are returned, borrowed cookware changes hands. A child learns that a friend will travel another way. Families compare directions and promise to meet farther west. Then the dust separates them. The smaller company takes the cut-off. At first, the ground is open and the route seems shorter. Its supporters become irritatingly pleased with themselves, which is usually when geography prepares a correction. The water is farther than expected. By afternoon, the grass is thin. One team slows. A family suggests stopping, but others argue that the next reported source cannot be far. The company continues. Now every earlier conflict returns inside a smaller group. There are fewer spare animals. Fewer people can help lift a wagon. One skilled carpenter has taken the main route. So has the family carrying extra medicine. The shortcut has saved distance and reduced resilience. At dusk, they reach water, but not enough good grazing for every team. Wagons spread along the bank. People lead animals farther out. One household finds a better patch and tries to keep its location quiet. Another follows the sound of bells and discovers it anyway. The argument begins with grass. It becomes an argument about fairness, previous favours, and whether one family takes more help than it returns. History enjoys arranging moral questions beside hungry oxen. A company rule may say resources should be shared. The grass does not become larger because the rule is admirable. By the next day, one animal can no longer pull. Its owners asked to distribute part of the wagon's load. Several families agree to take food and bedding. One refuses, explaining that its own axle repair will not support more weight. The refusal sounds harsh. It may also be true. This is the limit of mutual aid. Assistance can transfer danger rather than remove it. If a strong team pulls a weak wagon, the strong team becomes less strong. If one family shares food, its own margin narrows. If the company waits for every illness, it risks the season. If it leaves the vulnerable behind, cooperation becomes a word used only while convenient. No decision preserves everyone equally. The company reduces the damaged household's load. Furniture is already gone, so the choices are painful. Food is divided among wagons. Bedding is compressed. Tools are examined again. A child's small box remains on the ground because the adults need the weight more than the explanation. The weakened wagon moves, but slowly. For 2 days, the company loses distance. People begin estimating what remains in the flour sacks. The weather has cooled. Animals are showing ribs. One family quietly reduces its evening portions and tells the children they ate more earlier. Scarcity changes speech. Offers become questions. Questions become accusations. A shared bag of meal is measured more carefully. Coffee disappears from one campfire. Someone notices. A family thought generous last month now locks a box at night. The wagon company still looks united from a distance. Up close, it is beginning to close doors that have no walls. Illness sharpens the fracture. A traveller develops fever and cannot walk. The family places him in the wagon, removes more cargo, and requests another day of rest. Some agree. Others argue that the company must move before colder weather. A parent with healthy children may sound cruel beside the sickbed. That same parent may be counting food and fearing that compassion today creates hunger next week. The captain cannot produce a moral answer from a route guide. He asks for volunteers to remain behind. A few people do, others continue. The company splits again, this time not over a road, but over a body. Those who stay create a smaller camp. They gather fuel, tend animals, and share food while waiting to see whether the sick traveller improves. The wagons ahead leave tracks that wind out of sight. Being left behind does not always mean deliberate abandonment. Relatives or volunteers may accept the same delay, and a company may send help back. But fewer people still means fewer animals, tools, guards, and possible solutions. The mythology prefers one brave line moving west. The reality is messier. Companies formed, divided, reorganized, absorbed strangers, lost members, and occasionally left households to continue alone, all with new companions. Community was not a permanent possession. It had to be rebuilt after every fracture. Several days later, the delayed group moves again. The sick traveller is stronger, though still riding. Their animals are rested, but the season is not. They follow the tracks of the larger company and find ashes, broken harness, a damaged bucket, and one note left where the trail branches. The message gives directions and reports water ahead. It is a small act of care from people who could not remain. That matters because abandonment and assistance are not perfect opposites. They can exist in the same decision. A company may refuse another day and still leave food or directions behind. People rarely fit clean categories. When the delayed wagons catch sight of the larger group again, neither company is the same. The faster travellers have lost an animal. The slower group has used more food. One wagon carries a person who cannot yet walk. Another carries cargo borrowed from 3 households. Debts, resentments, and gratitude travel together. The reunion is practical. People ask about water, weather, and the road ahead. A tool is returned. Children find one another. Adults count wagons and avoid certain arguments until after supper. There is relief, but not restoration. Everyone now understands that the company can break over distance, grass, illness, money, pride, or one family's need for time. And as Mount Hood and the final difficult approaches draw nearer, the group faces a harder truth. Some wagons may soon be impossible to save at all. The next survival decision will not be whether everyone waits. It will be whether the people continue after the vehicle carrying their household can no longer continue with them. The wagon does not fail with a dramatic final sound. It simply reaches the point where every repair asks for more than the family has left. The axle has been reinforced twice. One wheel carries a tyre that no longer fits the wood beneath it. The oxen are thin. Food has been redistributed. The company is entering colder country, and the road ahead rises toward grades that a healthy team would find difficult. The family stops beside the trail and looks at the vehicle that has carried almost everything. For months, the wagon has been shelter, pantry, workshop, sick room, nursery, and proof that the household still possesses a plan. Now it is too heavy to save the people depending on it. The first response is to try once more. Cargo comes out. The team is double yoked with animals borrowed from another wagon. Adults push at the wheels. A chain tightens around the damaged axle. The oxen lean forward until the yokes press hard against their shoulders. The wagon moves several yards. Then the repaired wood shifts again. No one needs a speech. The family understands. They begin sorting for a journey without the wagon. Food is divided into what can be carried, what can be transferred, and what cannot be saved. Blankets are rolled tightly. Tools are reduced to a knife, an axe, perhaps a firearm, repair items, cooking equipment, and whatever else the adults believe will matter before the next settlement. Every object must now justify itself in a different way. A pot is no longer measured against wagon space. It is measured against a person's back. A sack of flour is no longer cargo. It is weight that must walk. Once the wagon is abandoned, You are no longer choosing what to own. You are choosing what one tired body can carry before dark. The family asks neighbouring wagons for room. One household can take bedding. Another accepts food. A third agrees to carry a child who has been ill. No single wagon has enough empty capacity to absorb an entire life, so the family is distributed across the company. The household continues, but its walls have disappeared. A parent walks beside one wagon while a child rides in another. Tools travel with someone else's supplies. Food is divided among people who must remember which portion belongs to whom. The family can no longer reach everything it owns at once. That loss of control is part of the survival cost. A wagon had kept the household's objects together even when the people walked outside it. Without the wagon, every blanket, meal, medicine packet, and child depends on another arrangement holding. Trust becomes physical. The abandoned vehicle is stripped before the company leaves. Useful iron comes off first. Pins, bolts, chain, brackets, and anything that might repair another wagon are removed. Canvas may become shelter material. Boards may be saved if animals or people can carry them. The wheel itself may be left complete because no one can justify its weight. The family is not throwing away a machine. It is converting the machine into smaller chances. A length of chain may save another axle. A piece of canvas may keep a sick person dry. A spoke may become firewood, a lever, or part of a later repair. The wagon that can no longer move still contributes to movement by being dismantled. The Barlow-Palmer emigrants faced a larger version near Mount Hood in 1845. Rain, cold, limited provisions, and difficult forested ground made their wagons increasingly hard to preserve. They built a rough storehouse, later remembered as Fort Deposit, left wagons and possessions, loaded food and bedding onto livestock, and continued through wet mountain country, much of it on foot. It was one particular crisis, but its rule is clear. The wagon had carried the plan west. Survival began when the people stopped serving it. From a distance. Travellers without their wagons no longer resemble the familiar Oregon Trail image at all. They are people on foot beside animals and other families' vehicles, carrying bundles, watching children, and counting miles to the next place where help may exist. Some families used pack animals. Others consolidated households into one wagon, cached a damaged vehicle, or sent stronger travellers ahead for food, animals, and help. Every method transferred danger. Waiting consumed supplies, leaving reduced camp labour, and crowding another wagon strained its team. There was no clean escape from the failed system. Survival meant choosing the next system with the fewest immediate weaknesses. Weather narrowed the choices. Cold rain turns a stopped camp into a place that cannot remain temporary for long. Canvas removed from the wagon is stretched between poles or trees. Bedding is kept above wet ground with branches, boards, or whatever can be arranged. A small fire is guarded from wind. Emergency shelter lacks the reassuring shape of home. It is fabric, smoke, damp clothing, and adults making the arrangements sound better than it looks so the children will settle. The family waits for a traveller sent ahead. Hours pass. The company must decide how many people remain and how many continue toward help. Animals need forage. Food must be divided again. The stronger group may move forward, while relatives or volunteers stay with the stranded household. Rescue, where it came, was built from ordinary resources. Another team, wagon space created elsewhere, a replacement animal, food, information, and people walking back along miles they had already completed. It was neighbours surrendering time, strength, and distance. And rescue could fail. Help might arrive late, replacement animals might be too weak, a fort or settlement might be farther than reported. The company might be unable to spare anyone without placing more households at risk. Not every family reached Oregon intact. Some turned back. Some stopped elsewhere. Some lost people, animals, wagons, or property. Some arrived through luck and assistance that later stories compressed into perseverance. The family walking now does not know which version will become theirs. It knows only the next practical task. Keep the children near. Keep the blankets dry. Keep the food portions separate. Watch the animals carrying the remaining load. Reach the next water before dark. At this point, the family is no longer packing for Oregon. It is packing for Thursday. The road has reduced the future to instructions small enough to survive the day. This reduction can feel like defeat, but it also removes dangerous illusions. The family no longer believes it can carry an entire past into a new place. It no longer mistakes ownership for security. It no longer imagines independence as the absence of debt, help, trade, or care. Every mile now proves the opposite. A child sleeps beneath another family's canvas. A stranger carries the axe. A neighbour's ox pulls the flour. Someone who argued against waiting 3 days earlier now walks back with food. The family owns less now and depends on more people. Near evening, the road reaches a ridge. The travellers can see farther west than they have for days. Smoke rises somewhere ahead. It may come from another emigrant camp, a station, a settlement, or people already living in the country the company continues to treat as its destination. The site does not guarantee safety, but it offers direction. Behind them, the abandoned wagon remains beside the road. Its box is open. Its useful metal is gone. One wheel stands slightly crooked against the frame, still attached to a machine that will not move again. The family does not return for it. For the first time since departure, the wheel is no longer their problem. The people continue west on foot, carrying only what the living can still use. That sentence sounds almost simple. It is not. The road still contains cold mornings, wet ground, uncertain food, tired animals, and the work of protecting children. The family has abandoned the wagon, not the journey. It has stopped pretending the journey can be completed in its original form. For several days, their belongings remain scattered among other households. The blankets are in one wagon. A bag of flour travels in another. The axe hangs from a different vehicle. One child rides when fever returns. Another walks beside an ox team that does not belong to the family. At each stop, people must remember where everything has gone. A meal depends on several wagons. A cold night depends on borrowed space. Medicine depends on finding the right bundle before dark. The family still exists, but it has become an agreement held across the company. This is what the word survival often hides. It suggests one person enduring through strength. On the trail, endurance was frequently distributed. One person carried food, another offered shelter. Someone repaired a strap. Someone watched the children while another searched for animals. A family survived because its needs were divided among people whose own wagons were already full. The cost did not vanish. It moved. A borrowed ox worked harder. A neighbouring wagon carried additional weight. A woman cooked for more people. An older child surrendered a place beneath canvas. A tired traveller walked farther because someone sicker needed to ride. Every rescue created another small burden somewhere else. That does not make the help less generous. It makes the generosity visible. As the travellers move toward lower country, the weather begins to soften. Rain still comes, but it no longer carries the same threat of an exposed high crossing. Grass improves in places. Smoke ahead becomes more frequent. The road shows signs of people, trade, farms, stations, and settlements. Arrival begins not as a single moment, but as the gradual return of options. Food can sometimes be purchased. A roof may be found. An animal may be rested without fearing that the whole company will disappear over the next ridge. The family can stop measuring every object against the strength left in an ox. Yet relief carries its own confusion. The household that imagined entering Oregon with a wagon full of property now approaches with bundles, debts, borrowed space, and a list of people who made the arrival possible. Some possessions are gone forever. Some may be recovered later. Some no longer matter. The family has spent months discovering that ownership and usefulness are not the same thing. A heavy chest can become danger. A cup can become precious. A strip of leather can keep a person walking. A stranger's rope can matter more than furniture chosen for a future room. The road has rearranged value according to life. It has also rearranged the story the family may tell. Years later, a survivor might remember courage, determination, and the first sight of the place where the journey ended. Those memories can be true, but memory likes to polish the route. It may shorten the delays. It may strengthen the oxen. It may turn borrowed labour into family ingenuity and native knowledge into scenery. It may forget the child carried by another household, the trader who extended credit, the person who returned with food, the woman who remained awake with the sick, or the hired hand who heard the axle failing before anyone else. The wagon disappears first from the road. Dependence often disappears later from the story. That is why the abandoned wheel matters. It remains behind where the family left it. Rain darkens the wood. Sun dries it again. The iron tire loosens slowly around the rim. Grass begins growing beneath the wagon box. Travellers passing later may stop, inspect the remaining pieces, and take whatever can still be used. A bolt disappears, then a strip of iron, perhaps a spoke. The wagon continues helping people after it has stopped being a wagon. Eventually, what remains looks less like a household and more like weathered material beside a road. No sign explains who owned it, no record lists every object removed, or tells the next traveller that children once slept beneath its canvas. The object survives more quietly than the people's stories. Back in the moving company, the family reaches another camp. The evening routine begins. Water is carried. Animals attended. Food is unpacked from several different wagons and brought together near one fire. The meal is modest, but enough. Someone counts the remaining flour. Someone repairs a torn blanket. A child places a small object beside the fire, the sort of object adults might have discarded if they had noticed it still travelling. The adults discuss tomorrow's distance. Their voices sound different now. They no longer assume that moving forward is always the correct choice. They ask about weather, animals, water, health, and who needs rest. The trail has taught them a rule no guidebook could make comfortable. The plan serves the people. The people do not serve the plan. When oxen failed, survival could mean stopping. When wagons failed, survival could mean dismantling them. When weather destroyed the schedule, survival could mean accepting delay, changing routes, surrendering property, or depending on others. The families who reached Oregon did not prove every decision wise. They corrected enough mistakes before their remaining choices disappeared. Luck mattered. Money mattered. Health mattered. Timing mattered. The condition of the animals mattered. The presence of skilled, generous, informed people mattered. And the land was never an empty stage waiting for courage. The travellers crossed native homelands, used existing knowledge and routes, purchased food and services, and entered a settlement process that would bring lasting loss to people already living there. Arrival did not erase that history. Neither did hardship excuse it. Both belong in the final image. A vulnerable family could depend deeply on others while also participating in a larger system of dispossession. History becomes dishonest when it allows suffering to prove innocence or achievement to erase cost. Near the end of the Barlow Road, Laurel Hill offered one final mechanical irony. For most of the continent, a wagon survived by keeping its wheels turning. On the steep descent there, travellers could chain or lock wheels so they would not turn freely. Logs or branches might be dragged to create resistance. Ropes could be wrapped around stumps while the wagon was lowered through force and friction. After 2,000 miles of trying to create movement, survival could depend on controlling it. The wheel had never been the goal. The people were. The fire settles lower. Around it, the family's remaining possessions fit into a surprisingly small space. A few blankets, food, tools, clothing, documents kept dry through every crossing. Perhaps one unnecessary object that survived because someone loved it enough to carry it after usefulness had stopped, explaining the weight. Beyond the fire, wagons stand in uneven rows. Some are patched, some lean, some belong partly to more than one household now. The animals graze in the dark, their bells sounding occasionally beyond the light. No one knows yet which repairs will last, but the family is closer. Morning will bring another walk, another packing, and another set of choices. There is no grand victory waiting at breakfast, only movement made possible, one day at a time. Far behind them, the abandoned wheel stands beside the trail. At the beginning of this journey, a stopped wheel meant the family might not survive. Now its stillness means something else. The wagon has given everything it could: shelter, storage, distance, and finally, its own body, in pieces. The wheel no longer turns. The family does